Beneath San Marino's golden sunset, Ethan Callahan, the icy real estate tycoon, gazes from his skyscraper hollow inside. A misdialed call from a trembling girl. Lily shakes his empire. Can one small voice melt the frost around his heart? What would you do if you were Ethan? The city of San Marino shimmered beneath the golden haze of a Pacific sunset. From the top floor of Callahan Tower, a gleaming monolith of glass and steel, the view stretched endlessly, ocean to the west, hills to the east, and in between, a sea of lives. But inside the pristine office, lined with Italian marble and minimalist elegance, Ethan Callahan stood unmoved. He stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands buried in the pockets of his tailored navy suit, his expression carved from stone. The sun lit his angular features in copper and amber, but the warmth didn't touch the chill behind his steel blue eyes. At 39, Ethan was everything the world expected from a real estate mogul: powerful, calculated, unshakably composed. The kind of man who could close $1 billion deal before breakfast and then deliver a cold-blooded eviction by lunch. The tabloids called him the Ice King of San Marino. To the board, he was a genius. To his competitors, a storm in a suit. But tonight, even with the sun kissing the edge of the ocean and the city glowing at his feet, Ethan felt hollow. A dull ache behind his ribs he couldn't name, couldn't shake. Maybe it was the Bay Ridge project, or maybe something deeper. The office around him buzzed with quiet power. His assistant had left an hour ago, the last meeting had wrapped, and his phone buzzed softly on the desk with emails from lawyers, analysts, and contractors all needing answers. But Ethan didn't move. His mind was with the numbers, the ones he had just reviewed, the ones tied to lives he would never meet. Bay Ridge, a decaying apartment complex near the pier, was next in line for demolition. Its residents were due to be relocated by the end of the quarter. A clean sweep, a fresh canvas for the luxury condos that would rise in their place. He should have felt triumphant. The plan was flawless on paper. Profit margins glowed red hot. Investors were circling like sharks. Yet something kept him from signing the final clearance memo, sitting quietly in the center of his walnut desk. He turned away from the window and stared at it, willing himself to just pick up the pen. Instead, he exhaled, reached for his phone, and opened the contact list. He needed to push the last few meetings to tomorrow. His head wasn't in the right place. His finger hovered over Clara, executive assistant, but when he tapped, he didn't notice that the number that dialed was wrong. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a small voice, shaky and soft, answered, "Hello." Ethan blinked. Not Clara, a child. "Hi, are you the man who's coming to take our house?" The words, so fragile and direct, hit him like a slap. He said nothing at first, confused. "Excuse me?" He managed his voice cool and controlled, but the silence on the other end wasn't the awkward kind. It was fearful. "Please don't take it," the little voice said again, this time trembling. "It's the only house we have. My mom said we might have to leave soon." His hand froze. For a moment, the room seemed smaller, the air heavier. Ethan's thumb hovered over the red button to hang up, but he didn't press it. Instead, he listened. The voice, young female, was raw and unfiltered in a way he hadn't heard in years. There was no negotiation, no pretense, just fear. "I think you have the wrong number," Ethan said stiffly, but his voice faltered. He expected the call to end, but then came a sound so faint it barely reached him, a sniffle. And just like that, something shifted. Ethan sat down slowly in his leather chair, the skyline forgotten. "Who is this?" he asked, quieter now, his tone less corporate, more human. There was a pause. "My name's Lily," the girl said, almost whispering. "I'm 8. Another pause. "Are you really not the man coming to take our house?" Ethan swallowed, unsure what to say. In all his years of running this empire, he'd never spoken to a child about eviction. He always dealt with numbers, units, contracts, not voices, not names, not Lily. She mentioned Bay Ridge, apartment 2C. Ethan knew it. It was listed in the reports. The complex with mold problems, unstable wiring, overdue rent rolls. They were slated for demolition in 60 days. He remembered the unit layout, the lease violations. But now there was a child attached to the data, a little girl with fear in her voice, and a mother too exhausted to hide the truth from her. For the first time, the eviction notice didn't look like a line item. It looked like a life. He leaned back, closed his eyes. A memory surfaced, his mother crying in their old kitchen, a foreclosure notice on the fridge. Him 10 years old, promising her he'd grow up and buy every damn house in the city so no one could take theirs again. He had made good on that promise. And yet here he was on the other end of that same call, a stranger now holding the power his landlord once held. Lily, he said, the name strange and soft on his tongue. Where's your mom? She hesitated. Working. She always works. His jaw tightened. He didn't know what he was doing. This wasn't in any executive playbook, but something inside him had cracked, and through it came a question he didn't expect to ask. Can you tell me your address again? Her voice brightened, a little surprised but hopeful. She gave it to him. Ethan jotted it down without thinking. The call ended minutes later, but Ethan stayed in his chair, long after the glow of the city flickering behind him like ghosts in the glass. Outside, the sun dipped below the edge of the world. Inside, Ethan Callahan sat alone in a tower he built, holding a scrap of paper that felt heavier than any portfolio he had ever managed. He didn't understand it fully yet, but something had begun, a fracture in the ice, a thread unraveling. And in the silence that followed, one truth became impossible to ignore: that little girl's voice had reached a part of him that had been dead for years. The office lights had dimmed to their ambient evening setting, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. Ethan Callahan rubbed his temples with one hand while the other hovered over his phone screen. The numbers from the Bay Ridge report were circling in his head like vultures: foreclosures, timelines, payout figures. He had just read that over 70 families would be displaced in the next 60 days. His company had already approved the permits. It was done. Still, a strange pressure pressed at the back of his neck. He tapped on his assistant Clara's name to cancel his final meeting of the day, but something must have glitched. The wrong contact was dialed. He barely noticed as the line began to ring. He expected Clara's crisp, professional voice, maybe the sound of keyboard clicks in the background. Instead, after 2 rings, there was silence, then a hesitant, tiny voice. Hello, Ethan straightened. This wasn't Clara. He glanced at the screen. Same area code, but not her number. Hi, he said slowly, his corporate tone softening just slightly. Before he could correct the mistake, the voice continued, trembling, but trying to be brave. Are you the man who's coming to take our house? For a second, Ethan didn't speak. The question caught him off guard, blunt, innocent, and somehow devastating. Excuse me, he said finally, but the voice was already breaking. Please don't, the girl whispered. My mom said we might have to leave, but we don't have anywhere else to go. I heard her crying. Her words landed like a punch to his gut. Ethan stood frozen, the sleek, sterile room around him suddenly feeling like a cage. I think you have the wrong number, he said, but it came out hoarse, unsure. The child didn't respond right away. Then, barely audible, she sniffled and said, You sound like him. Like someone who can make that kind of thing happen. Her vulnerability poured through the phone like cold air into his veins. Ethan's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to end the call, thumb hovering over the red circle. This wasn't his problem. This wasn't business. But then came a sound so small he almost missed it. A breath hitched mid-sob, like she was trying hard not to cry. It reminded him of his own mother sitting on their worn-out couch when the power went out, and the eviction notice was taped to their door. His chest ached with a memory he hadn't touched in years. Don't cry, he said softly, almost involuntarily. I'm not going to take your house. I promise. There was silence on the other end, broken only by a soft rustle, as if she were adjusting the phone. Then carefully she asked, You promise? Ethan swallowed. Yeah, I promise. What's your name, Lily? She said after a pause, voice small but no longer shaking. I'm 8. She sounded proud of the number, like she wanted him to know she wasn't a baby. Ethan closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. 8. Too young to be scared about eviction. Too young to carry the weight of adult fear on her tiny shoulders. Where do you live, Lily? He asked gently. She hesitated again, but then she answered Bay Ridge Apartments. Unit 2C. It's the one with the broken elevator. Mommy says we're lucky we're on the second floor. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew that complex, knew the unit, knew the date it was scheduled for demolition. He had signed off on it himself. In that moment, the spreadsheet stopped being a spreadsheet. It had a name, a voice, a heartbeat, a child with fears, hopes, and a mother who cried quietly at night. She works all the time, Lily said suddenly, as if trying to fill the silence. At the diner and sometimes cleaning houses. But she's tired. I told her I could help, but she says my job is to go to school and draw pretty pictures. Her innocence wrapped around Ethan's heart like a vice. He found himself imagining her messy ponytail, too big backpack, maybe holding onto a teddy bear that had seen better days. She sounds like a good mom, he said softly. She is, Lily whispered. But I don't want her to cry anymore. That's why I answered the phone. I thought maybe I could stop it. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the desk, his perfectly organized space forgotten. Lily, I don't know how you got this number, but I'm glad you called me. Really? She asked, voice lifting a little like hope was climbing back into her chest. Really? He said. Can I talk to your mom sometime? She'll be home late, Lily replied. Sometimes past bedtime. But I can tell her you called. What's your name? He paused. Then for once, he didn't give her the version from press conferences or magazine profiles. Just the truth. My name's Ethan. Okay, Lily said. Ethan, thank you for listening. I was scared, but you're not scary. Ethan smiled a slow, aching curve he hadn't felt in years. I'm glad I don't sound scary, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. You're really brave, Lily. The line went quiet again, but this time it was peaceful. When they finally said goodbye, Ethan sat there still holding the phone, as the city lights blinked awake outside. He didn't know why he cared, but he did. And somewhere deep inside him something had shifted. Maybe not a revolution, not yet, but the beginning of one. As he finally set the phone down, the spreadsheet with the Bay Ridge units caught his eye. Line 23, Apartment 2C, scheduled for clearance in 41 days. Lily's home. He reached for a pen and circled the line slowly, deliberately. Then he wrote one word in bold letters across the margin: review. That night, as he walked out of his building into the velvet dusk, Ethan Callahan wasn't thinking about profits or deadlines. He was thinking about a little girl with a cracked voice and too much courage. And somehow, for reasons he couldn't explain, he knew that wouldn't be the last time he heard her name. The next morning, a gray veil of clouds hung low over San Marino, the ocean cloaked in mist, like the city was holding its breath. Ethan Callahan sat behind the wheel of his obsidian black Mercedes, parked just outside the rusted chain-link fence that wrapped around Bay Ridge Apartments. The windshield wipers swept once, clearing a layer of drizzle that matched the fog in his mind. He stared at the worn-out buildings ahead, the same ones he'd signed off for demolition, only now the address wasn't just a line on a spreadsheet. It was Lily's home, and maybe the place he was meant to face. The complex looked even worse up close. The stucco exterior peeled like burnt skin, and graffiti bled down the sides in faded reds and blacks. Rust hugged the fire escapes, and garbage bins overflowed onto cracked sidewalks. The smell, a mix of mildew oil and despair, clung to the air like something alive. Ethan stepped out of the car, his polished Italian shoes sinking slightly into the muddy concrete. He paused, the cold wind brushing against his face, a quiet part of him wondering what the hell he was doing there. CEOs didn't visit buildings in person, not like this. He reached the base of the staircase leading to Unit 2C and hesitated. Every step groaned beneath his weight as he climbed the iron railing slick under his palm. When he reached the landing, his fingers hovered over the doorbell heart, thudding in a way he hadn't felt since the night of Daniel's funeral. A deep part of him still heard the laughter of his best friend echoing across a sunlit college campus, but that laughter had ended on a rain-soaked highway almost a decade ago. And now, standing in front of a chipped brown door in a forgotten building, Ethan was about to meet The daughter Daniel never got to raise. The door opened before he knocked. A woman stood there barefoot, wearing a faded t-shirt and jeans that had seen better years. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose knot, and strands had escaped to frame her face. Her eyes, tired, wary, dark as storm water, met his with a protective sharpness. "Who are you?" she asked, voice low and steady but threaded with exhaustion. Ethan opened his mouth, but she cut in before he could speak. "You're the landlord, aren't you? Look, we're already packing. No need to kick us while we're down." She started to shut the door. "No," Ethan said quickly, raising both hands, unsure why the sting of her words hurt so much. "I'm not here to evict anyone." She paused, her eyes narrowing, scanning the expensive coat, the watch, the tailored suit. "Then what do you want?" she asked, her voice tight, holding the door half closed like a shield. "I'm Ethan Callahan," he said. I called this number by accident yesterday. I spoke to a little girl, Lily." At her daughter's name, the woman's expression shifted. Something unreadable passed through her features. She turned her head slightly. "Lily, come here." From behind her, a small figure emerged, dark curls, oversized t-shirt, clutching a threadbare teddy bear. Lily's eyes widened when she saw Ethan, her mouth forming a soft, "Oh, it's you," she said, a faint smile flickering across her lips. "You're the man from the phone. The nice one." Ethan's chest tightened. "Hi, Lily." He knelt slightly to meet her eye level. "I told you I'd come check, didn't I?" Emily's arms folded across her chest. "Check what?" she asked, suspicion still coloring every word. "You said you weren't the landlord, but you're dressed like someone who owns half the city." "I do," Ethan admitted quietly. "My company owns Bay Ridge, and we were planning to redevelop the area." He looked at her, voice heavy. "I didn't know who lived here, not really, until I talked to Lily." Emily's mouth pressed into a hard line. "So what, you came to see the damage in person, or to feel better about the lives you're uprooting?" Her words hit with precision. Ethan had no defense. He looked away, jaw clenched, the guilt rolling through him like a storm tide. "No," he said, voice barely audible. "I came because I needed to remember who I was before all this." Emily's expression faltered just slightly. Ethan stepped inside at her hesitant nod. The apartment was clean but sparse. A broken coffee table sat in front of a sagging sofa. On the wall, 3 drawings had been taped, one of a beach, another of a woman and a child holding hands, and the third, a tall man in a suit smiling beside them. "She drew that after the phone call," Emily said, noticing where his eyes landed. "She said you were kind." Ethan stared at the picture, and something inside him fractured. "She reminded me of someone I lost," he said, barely above a whisper. "Daniel Hunter." Emily froze. You knew Daniel?" Her voice shook softer now. "We were best friends. Since college. We built the company together. I didn't know he had a daughter." Ethan confessed. "He never told me." Her hands trembled as she touched the wall. "We broke up before I knew I was pregnant. I tried to find him, but the accident happened. I never got to tell him." Silence stretched between them, thick and aching. Ethan turned to Lily, watching her hum softly as she colored in the corner, oblivious to the past, stitching itself together behind her. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, the words cracking in his throat. "I should have known. I should have asked." Emily shook her head, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I never wanted anything from him, just to keep her safe." "And now Merrick wants to use her," Ethan muttered bitterly, more to himself than to her. But Emily caught it. "Who's Merrick?" she asked. Ethan's gaze hardened. "A man who doesn't care who gets hurt as long as he wins. He knows Lily is Daniel's heir, and he'll use that to steal what Daniel and I built." Emily stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "What happens now?" she asked, and the fear in her voice was the kind that only mothers knew, the fear of losing something they can't replace. Ethan looked at her, really looked, and said, "Now I protect her. I protect you, whatever it takes." For the first time, her eyes softened. Not trust, not yet, but something close. "We don't need charity," she said, "just a chance to breathe." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then I'll make room for that breath." The sun rose over San Marino, like it had every other morning, soft light slipping between the skyscrapers, casting gold across the marble floors of Callahan Tower. But inside Ethan's office, the atmosphere was anything but calm. He stood by the window, hands clenched behind his back, eyes locked on the city that pulsed with his legacy. His phone buzzed once, a message from Martin, short, urgent. "Merrick knows. We need to talk, now." The words hit like cold water, shattering the fragile stillness that had wrapped itself around the past few days. Ethan turned slowly, his jaw tightening, and picked up the phone. "Martin," he said, barely keeping the edge out of his voice. "What happened?" Martin didn't waste a second. "He's investigating. Somehow, someone leaked information about Lily's connection to Daniel. Merrick's moving fast. I just got wind he's reached out to Daniel's paternal relatives." Ethan went still. The words echoed through him like thunder across a canyon. "The Hunters?" he asked. "That's right," Martin said grimly. "Margaret and Ronald. They never showed up when Daniel died. Didn't come to the funeral. But now Merrick's promising them legal counsel, guardianship rights, and millions." Ethan's hand tightened around the edge of his desk until the wood creaked. "He's going to use them to take Lily," he said, voice low with fury. "He'll claim she needs a stable home, blood relatives. He'll paint Emily as unfit, make the court believe a single mother living in low-income housing can't provide. And once they get custody," Martin added, "they control the 15% stake. Merrick gets a puppet seat at the table." Ethan stepped away from the desk, pacing the length of the office, every step a storm building in his chest. This wasn't just business anymore. This was war. The betrayal cut deeper than he expected. Not just at Merrick, but at himself for not seeing it coming sooner. He'd underestimated Merrick's hunger, his reach. And now Lily, the little girl who drew him pictures and believed in him with her whole heart, was a target in a game she didn't even know she was playing. A pawn. Ethan stopped by the window, breathing hard, watching a delivery truck pull up below. The city went on, oblivious. But his world had just tilted, and there was no going back. He pulled out his phone and dialed Emily's number. Fingers moving fast, heart pounding. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, breathless. He'd clearly caught her mid-shift. "Emily, it's me," he said. "Something's happened. I need to see you. It can't wait." There was a pause, then a quiet, "Okay, we're at the apartment. Come by." As he ended the call, Ethan felt it again, that fierce protective instinct that had begun the moment Lily said his name. He was no longer just a businessman. He was a guardian. And now he would fight like hell. 30 minutes later, he stood outside the door of Unit 2C. When Emily opened it, her eyes searched his face and immediately understood something was wrong. She stepped aside without a word. Lily was curled up on the couch, humming softly to herself as she colored. Ethan looked at her, a pang tearing through him. He turned to Emily. "She doesn't need to hear this," he whispered. Emily nodded. "Lily, sweetheart, go finish your picture in the bedroom." "Okay?" Lily gave them a curious glance but obeyed, bouncing away with her markers. When the door closed, Ethan turned to Emily. "Merrick knows about Lily, and he's not going to come at us directly. He's going through Daniel's relatives. He's offering them guardianship support. A new life. All they have to do is take Lily away from you." Emily went pale. Her back hit the wall as she stared at him, arms wrapping around her stomach as though trying to hold herself together. They can't. They don't even know her. They've never called, never written. Why would they?" Money, Ethan cut in. "And power. With Lily's inheritance, Merrick could destroy everything Daniel and I built." Emily's hands shook. "But she's mine," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I've raised her. I held her through fevers, through nightmares. I gave up everything for her. They can't just walk in and take her away." Ethan stepped forward, his voice quiet, but unbreakable. "They won't. I swear to you, Emily. I will fight this with everything I have. Merrick doesn't get to win. Not this time." For a second, she looked like she might collapse, but she held firm, wiping at her tears roughly. "What do we do?" she asked. "We prepare," Ethan said. "I'm pulling my legal team off everything else. This is priority one. We'll build the case to protect her and you." Emily nodded, her jaw clenched. "She can't know," she whispered. "I won't let her live in fear." Ethan agreed, a fire already building in his chest. But as he looked around, the tiny apartment saw the worn sofa, the cracked window, the single shelf of food. He knew Merrick would exploit every imperfection. The fight ahead would be brutal, and they were playing defense, unless he found a way to shift the game. As he left, Lily peeked through the door and waved. "Bye, Uncle Ethan." She called brightly, her face lit up with trust and joy. Ethan managed a smile, but it ached. Back in his car, he didn't start the engine right away. He stared out at the rain-slick street, every drop against the windshield a countdown. Merrick had already set things in motion. The hunters would file soon. The courts would listen. And unless Ethan moved faster, smarter, and harder, Lily could be lost to them. "Not on my watch," he muttered. He took one last look at the building. At the window, where Lily's drawing hung 3 figures hand in hand by a blue ocean. He wouldn't let it become a lie. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the 15th floor of Callahan Tower. Sleek, modern, almost too pristine for a mother and child used to peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. Ethan stepped out first, his shoes clicking softly on the polished wood floor, every step echoing the weight of the decision he was about to make. Behind him, Emily followed cautiously, her arm protectively around Lily's shoulders. The girl's eyes sparkled as they took in the tall windows, the high ceilings, the breathtaking view of the ocean far below. But Emily's gaze remained wary, as if all this might be a trap dressed in luxury. Ethan stopped in front of a glass-paneled door and turned the key. It clicked softly, and the door swung open to reveal a furnished apartment, sunlit, quiet, elegant in a way that wasn't loud, but lived in. Light gray walls, a spacious kitchen, a view that stretched endlessly west to the sea. "This is for you," Ethan said quietly. "It's a temporary space, but it's safe. No one knows you're here, and you don't have to worry about Bay Ridge or anyone knocking on your door again." Lily rushed in immediately, her sneakers squeaking, laughing as she explored every corner. "It's like a hotel. Mommy." Emily didn't move. "What's the catch?" she asked, arms crossed, eyes sharp with the learned instinct of a woman who'd heard too many promises with strings attached. Ethan looked at her steady. "No catch," he said. "Just protection. Just breathing room." She studied him, then finally stepped inside, slowly scanning the apartment like it might disappear if she blinked too fast. "You don't have to do this," she murmured, voice tight. "We've gotten by without help this far. I'm not here to be anyone's debt." Ethan nodded. "You're not. This isn't charity. It's about what's right." He walked to the table and placed a small envelope down. "There's a job for you at Callahan Tower," he said. "Cleaning supervisor. It's salaried, benefits, health coverage for you and Lily. No press, no names, just a real job with real security. You'll have access to everything. And more importantly, legal presence inside this building in case Merrick tries to challenge where Lily lives." Emily exhaled, the air hitching like she'd been holding it all day. "You thought of everything," she said quietly. "Because I have to," Ethan replied. "If we don't move now, Merrick will make the first strike." In the other room, Lily's voice echoed. "Mommy, look. The bathtub has jets." Ethan smiled faintly, but his heart twisted. How many things had this child lived without? How many days had she watched her mother carry the weight of survival like it was normal? Emily stepped toward the window, her hands brushing the curtain aside. "I never imagined we'd ever be somewhere like this," she whispered. "We used to dream of just having a door that locked right." She turned to him, and for the first time her eyes were filled not with suspicion, but something like quiet disbelief. "Why are you really doing this, Ethan?" He took a moment. His throat felt tight, like something unsaid had been clawing to get out. "Because I made a promise," he said. "Not just to Daniel, but to myself. I built this company on ambition, on control. But somewhere along the way, I lost the reason I started it all." Lily reminded me. She reminded me that people matter more than profit, that loyalty isn't just a word in a contract. Emily looked at him, caught off guard. She had expected strategy, not sincerity. "You're a hard man to read," she said, a flicker of something softer in her tone. "I'm not asking you to trust me overnight," Ethan said, "but I'll earn it. For you, and for her." Just then, a sudden crash from the hallway jolted them both. Lily had knocked over a vase while spinning with her arms outstretched like an airplane. Oops, she giggled, standing wide-eyed in the entryway. Ethan strode over, kneeling to her level. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded. It wasn't expensive, right? It's just glass, he said, ruffling her hair. You're what matters. Emily watched the exchange, her hand resting lightly against her collarbone where her heart was beating hard. She hadn't seen kindness like that in a long time from anyone. Later, after Lily had settled into the spare bedroom and Ethan was getting ready to leave, Emily stopped him at the door. I'll take the job, she said, her voice quiet but certain. And we'll stay here at least until the hearing. But if this becomes about pity, if you start looking at us like some charity project, I'm walking away. Ethan nodded solemnly. It's not pity, he said. It's purpose. She tilted her head, considering him. You're different than I expected, she murmured. So are you, he said, and for a moment something unspoken lingered between them. A flicker of mutual respect, maybe even the first breath of something deeper. When the door finally closed behind him, Ethan stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the city beyond the glass. He had made dozens of power moves in his life, but none had felt as consequential as that one small key left on the table. Back inside, Emily watched Lily tuck her teddy bear under the sheets of a real bed, her face glowing in a way it hadn't in years. And as she looked around the apartment, this strange, beautiful, unfamiliar place, she whispered under her breath, maybe, just maybe, we're not alone anymore. The days that followed moved differently inside Callahan Tower. Ethan's routine, once governed by deadlines and market projections, had taken on a quieter rhythm. It wasn't intentional at first. He just found himself lingering a little longer in the elevator, noticing the soft hum of conversation in the hallways, pausing in the lobby when he heard Lily's laughter echoing down from the mezzanine. He hadn't planned it, hadn't calculated the effect it would have, but somehow the sound of that little girl's joy had become the most grounding thing in his life. He saw them often. Emily pushing her cleaning cart with a quiet grace that turned every motion into purpose, Lily skipping beside her with stories tumbling from her mouth like confetti. Sometimes Ethan ran into them by accident. Other times he found reasons to be where they were. He told himself it was oversight, leadership presence. But when Lily waved at him like he was her favorite part of the day, he knew better. One afternoon, she tugged at his sleeve and said, "Uncle Ethan, guess what my teacher said my painting looked like real sunshine." He knelt beside her, smiling, and asked, "Was it brighter than this building?" She grinned. Way brighter. Emily at first kept her distance. She was polite, always professional, but reserved. She'd glance at him when she thought he wasn't looking, just enough to scan his eyes, searching for motives, watching for the moment everything would collapse. She was a woman who had built her life around preparing for loss. Trust didn't come easy, but slowly she began to soften. It happened in the smallest moments, in the quiet nods she gave, when he complimented her work, in the way her voice no longer trembled, when she asked questions, in the silence that no longer felt like a wall, but a pause between sentences. One evening, as Ethan stayed late reviewing contracts, he looked up to find Lily in the hallway, pressing her face against the glass. She was waiting for Emily to finish her shift, humming to herself, backpack slipping off one shoulder. Ethan opened the door and waved her in. "Want some cocoa?" he asked. Her eyes lit up. "Yes, please." He poured the powder into a mug, stirred it with more care than he gave to million-dollar deals. She drank, legs swinging from the couch, while he listened to her talk about her latest drawing, a rocket ship with her mom and him inside. "We're flying to Jupiter because Mommy says it's far away from trouble," she said, completely serious. Ethan couldn't speak for a moment. Later, Emily arrived, breath-catching, when she saw Lily curled up on the sofa, safe cocoa mustache across her upper lip. "She said she saw you working and didn't want to be alone," Ethan explained, standing quickly. Emily's eyes moved to her daughter, then back to him. "Thank you," she said, and the words carried weight, not just for the drink or the room or the moment, but for the way he'd treated Lily with such gentleness, with no agenda. "She adores you," she added softly. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being adored, not by anyone who didn't want something from him. He started adjusting his schedule subtly at first, skipping evening meetings to pass by the break room, taking calls from his office lobby instead of behind closed doors. Sometimes he brought Lily little things, a book about stars, a box of crayons, a cupcake from her favorite bakery downtown. He left them anonymously at first, but she always guessed. Emily caught him once placing a wrapped watercolor set on the bench outside their apartment. "You don't have to keep giving," she said, arms crossed though not unkindly. "She's already got everything she really wants." Ethan looked at her. "What's that?" Emily's voice softened. "Safety. Belonging. Someone who sees her." They began to talk more late at night after Lily had gone to sleep. Ethan would stop by with tea or an excuse about paperwork. They'd sit by the window overlooking the city, their voices low as if afraid of waking the walls. Emily told him about her years in nursing school, the accident that derailed it, the loneliness of single motherhood. He listened, not like a man gathering intel, but like someone hearing truth for the first time. In return, he told her about Daniel, about the nights they built this company from nothing, the guilt he carried, and the silence that had haunted him since Daniel's death. "I didn't know he had a daughter," he whispered. "But now I can't imagine a world without her." One night as they stood in the elevator, the air between them thick with something unspoken. Ethan glanced sideways and said, "You're different than I expected." Emily looked up, surprised. "How so?" He hesitated. "Stronger. Sharper. And maybe the only person who's ever looked at me without seeing dollar signs." She didn't smile, not exactly, but something flickered in her eyes, something that almost made him forget how to breathe. "And you're not as cold as you pretend to be," she replied. "Don't let the suit fool you," he said, and for the first time in a long while they both laughed. But beneath the laughter was something heavier. Every day they grew closer, the storm outside grew stronger. The court date was coming. Merrick hadn't made his move yet, but Ethan could feel it coiled and ready, waiting for the right moment. Still, when he looked at Emily and Lily, he saw something he never thought he'd find. Not redemption, not even forgiveness, but the beginning of something softer, something like hope. And so in a world where Ethan Callahan once believed love was a liability, he now found himself lingering outside a door that didn't belong to a boardroom, but to a home with laughter, warmth, and a little girl who looked up at him like he was her hero. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to believe it too. The email arrived just after dawn, slipping into Ethan's inbox like a dagger disguised as a whisper. Subject line: custody petition, Lily Monroe. Attached were court documents, cold and sharp, bearing the names Margaret and Ronald Hunter, the same distant relatives who hadn't spoken Daniel's name in nearly a decade. But now, thanks to Merrick's influence, they'd found the urgency to claim guardianship of a child they'd never even met. Ethan's chest tightened as he scanned the language. Seeking permanent custody, family stability, biological ties, financial capability. Every word was dressed in concern, but every sentence reeked of manipulation. He didn't realize his hands were shaking until his assistant entered with coffee and paused mid-step. "Sir," she asked gently, "reschedule everything," he said, his voice low, distant. "I need to go." Moments later, he was in the elevator, heart hammering against his ribs like a warning bell. Not for the company, not for his legacy, but for Lily, for Emily, for the fragile little world they'd built together, now under siege. By the time the doors opened on the 15th floor, he was already running on instinct. Emily answered the door in sweatpants and a loose t-shirt, her hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Ethan?" she asked, instantly alert. "What's wrong?" He stepped inside, pressing the documents into her hands. He filed. Ethan said, his voice barely steady. "Merrick, through Daniel's family. They want Lily." She read the first page and went pale. The paper trembled in her fingers. "But they've never even called," she whispered. "They don't know her favorite cereal, her bedtime story, how she still sleeps with her bear when it rains." "How could they?" Her voice broke, swallowed by a sob. Ethan pulled her into his arms before he even realized he'd moved. It wasn't planned, wasn't strategic, just instinct. Her body tensed, then slowly gave in. her face pressed against his chest as he held her tightly. "We're going to fight this," he whispered into her hair. "With everything we've got. I promise." She clutched him like he was the last solid thing left, and in that moment he felt something deeper than duty. It was more than protection. It was love in its rawest form, unspoken, but undeniable. They sat in silence for a long time. The documents spread across the kitchen table, untouched coffee growing cold. Ethan explained what would happen next, the hearings, the filings, the strategy. Emily listened, her expression unreadable. "They'll say I'm not enough," she said at last. "Single mother. No college degree. Living in a borrowed apartment working a janitor's job." Her voice was bitter, laced with fear. "And they'll be right on paper." "But they'll be wrong in truth," Ethan replied, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Lily is thriving because of you. And no judge will overlook that, not if I have anything to say about it." Their fingers lingered longer than necessary, and when Emily finally looked up, there was something in her eyes. Vulnerability mixed with something gentler, warmer. "I don't know why you care this much," she whispered. "You didn't know her. You didn't know me. But you've given us more than anyone ever has." Ethan exhaled his thumb, brushing the edge of her knuckles. "Because I see you," he said, "and I see her. And the moment I did, I couldn't look away." Later that evening, as dusk softened the edges of the city, Ethan invited Emily and Lily to his office for dinner. Pizza boxes, soda cans, and laughter echoing between glass walls, usually filled with silence. Lily bounced between them, telling stories about her math class and the mean pigeon that chased her near the park. For a little while, the shadow of the court case faded, replaced by light and warmth and something that felt like belonging. When Lily finally curled up on the office couch and fell asleep mid-sentence, Emily pulled the blanket over her and whispered, "She's never slept so easily anywhere else." Ethan stood beside her close enough to feel her breath. "I think she feels safe," he said. "Because of you," she replied softly. "And because of you," he added. The air between them shifted, the city lights casting gold across Emily's features. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering, and said, "You scare me, Ethan." He blinked. "Why?" "Because I never believed someone like you could exist," she said, "and now I don't know what I'd do if you left." He reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "I'm not leaving," he said, voice hoarse. "Not now. Not ever." She leaned into him then, just slightly, just enough. And as the city pulsed quietly below, Ethan realized something profound. Love had crept into his life. Not with fireworks, but in moments like this. In tears shared over court documents, in bedtime drawings. In a woman who'd rebuilt her world one heartbeat at a time. And now he would fight not just to keep them safe, but to keep them his. The courtroom was colder than it had any right to be, lit with sterile fluorescence that made everything, every emotion, every memory feel clinical and small. Ethan sat beside Emily at the plaintiff's table, their hands nearly touching, though neither of them dared to grasp the other. The hum of whispers filled the air, attorneys shifting papers, rustling, the low click of Margaret Hunter's pearl necklace tapping against her chest like a war drum. Across the aisle, Charles Merrick sat stone-faced, sharp in a charcoal suit, as if this was just another board meeting. But for Ethan, this wasn't business. This was family. And it was everything. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The sound of wooden benches creaked like bones. Ethan studied Emily's profile, tense, pale, but defiant. She wore a simple blue blouse, no makeup, hair pulled back. Honest. Real. A mother, not a fighter, but ready to go to war for her child. Lily sat in the hallway with a court-appointed guardian, blissfully unaware that her future was being negotiated like stock in a courtroom. When the proceedings began, Merrick's voice was the first to rise, measured, composed, dripping with calculated concern. "This is not a question of love," he said, gesturing to Emily. "It is a matter of long-term stability, financial resources, bloodline." Ethan clenched his jaw. "Bloodline," he repeated under his breath, as if it explained anything. as if DNA could outweigh bedtime stories and bruised knees kissed clean. Merrick introduced Margaret and Ronald Daniels' estranged aunt and uncle as the proposed guardians. They sat stiffly, hands folded, expressions bland with a rehearsed sorrow. "We didn't know about Lily until recently," Margaret said, voice thin, with faux warmth. "But she deserves to grow up with family, not in a janitor's closet in a high-rise tower." Ethan flinched. So did Emily. It was a cheap shot and deliberate. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she stood with trembling hands but clear eyes. "I've raised Lily since the moment she took her first breath," she began. "I've missed meals so she wouldn't. I've worked double shifts, slept on floors, held her through nightmares. She may not have my last name, but she's mine in every way that matters." Her voice cracked, but she didn't falter. "I'm not perfect, but I've never let her down, and I never will." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge seemed momentarily human. Ethan rose next. He wasn't meant to testify, but his presence as Daniel's business partner and Lily's temporary guardian carried weight. He looked directly at the judge. "Daniel Hunter wasn't just my co-founder. He was my brother in every way, but blood. And he would have never wanted his daughter raised by strangers who came forward for money and leverage." He turned to Margaret and Ronald. "You didn't come when he died. You didn't come when Emily struggled. You came when the shares became valuable." His voice lowered. "This isn't about Lily's best interests. This is about control." Merrick objected, but the judge waved him off, eyes fixed on Ethan. "And what role do you see yourself playing in Lily's life, Mr. Callahan?" the judge asked. Ethan took a breath. "I didn't plan this, but I see her, I hear her, and I love her. Not because I'm supposed to, but because I can't not." The words hung in the air, raw, unfiltered. Emily looked at him, eyes wide, and in that moment a crack ran through the wall she'd built around her heart, because he had said it, out loud. Then Merrick made his final move. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "we'd like to submit surveillance photos. Mr. Callahan spending private evenings with the defendant. Gifts, meals, potential romantic involvement. It compromises his testimony." The photos flashed on the screen, grainy, invasive moments stolen through a lens, Ethan holding Lily's hand in the park, Emily laughing beside him in the hallway, the hug at the elevator. Emily gasped softly. "He had us followed," she whispered, the horror sinking in. The courtroom murmured, but Ethan stood tall. "Yes, I care about them," he said. "Yes, I love them. And if that's a crime, go ahead and convict me." The judge called a recess. Emily rushed outside, fury and heartbreak bubbling beneath her skin. "How did he get those pictures? How long has he been watching us?" Ethan followed her into the corridor. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I didn't know. I never would have let him near you if I did." She turned, eyes bright with unshed tears. "They're trying to twist love into something dirty." Ethan took her hands gently. "Let them. We know the truth, and we'll prove it." An hour later, the judge returned. Silence fell like a blade. After flipping through pages, she looked up. "Custody will not be transferred. Ms. Monroe will retain legal guardianship with Mr. Callahan as her co-guardian and trustee of Daniel Hunter's estate for Lily's benefit. This court recognizes that family is not always blood, but choice. And in this case, that choice is clear." A collective exhale rippled through the room. Merrick stood frozen. Margaret looked like she might faint. Emily gripped Ethan's arm, disbelieving. "We won," she whispered. But more than that, something had shifted. Not just in the ruling, not just in the courtroom, but in them. When they stepped outside into the sun-drenched street, Lily ran toward them, wrapping her arms around both their legs. "Did I miss anything?" she asked, grinning. Ethan and Emily looked at each other, overwhelmed, relieved, changed. "Not a thing, sweetheart," Emily said. "Not a thing." The apartment on the 15th floor had never felt so quiet. The late afternoon light painted long golden lines across the hardwood, stretching like memories through the open windows. Ethan stood alone in the living room, staring at Lily's newest drawing pinned to the fridge, 3 figures hand in hand beneath a rainbow sky. He touched it lightly, as if afraid it might vanish. The court ruling was behind them. Merrick had lost. The Hunters had left in silence. But the storm that had raged around them for weeks had left something raw in its wake, something deeper than relief. The door opened behind him, and he turned to see Emily stepping in, Lily bounding past her with her backpack flapping. "We made it," Lily cried, throwing her arms up like she'd just won a marathon. Ethan laughed, catching her mid-jump and lifting her off the ground. "We did," he said, spinning her once before setting her down gently. But Emily lingered in the doorway, her eyes soft but distant, like she wasn't sure how to walk back into this new version of their life. "You okay?" he asked. She gave him a nod that didn't quite reach her eyes. They ate dinner on the couch that night, plates balanced on laps, the TV playing something none of them were really watching. Lily fell asleep, curled up with her head in Ethan's lap, fingers clutching his sleeve. Emily rose to clean the plates, but Ethan followed her into the kitchen. "You've been quiet," he said gently. She didn't answer right away. "Then I don't know what happens now." She turned to face him, her voice barely above a whisper. "The court's done. The fight is over. But us. Was it just part of that fight?" Ethan stepped closer, his pulse hammering like a second heartbeat. "No," he said, voice rough with truth. "It wasn't strategy, Emily. It never was." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "I came into your life thinking I was the one doing the saving," he said. "But the truth is, you saved me. You reminded me what it means to care about more than the bottom line, to feel something real." Her breath caught her eyes glossy. "But you're Ethan Callahan," she said. "You belong in boardrooms and headlines. I belong in borrowed apartments just trying to make it through." "I don't care where I belong on paper," he said. "All I know is that when I'm with you and Lily, it feels like the one place I've never wanted to leave." He moved closer until they were inches apart. "I love her. And I love you. And I know that's terrifying. Hell, it terrifies me too." She laughed softly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I was never supposed to fall in love with a billionaire," she whispered. "And I was never supposed to fall in love at all," he replied, brushing the tear away with his thumb. "But here we are." Outside, a storm began to roll in wind, brushing against the glass, thunder grumbling in the distance, like a memory resurfacing. Emily stepped forward, resting her forehead against his. "What if we mess this up?" she asked. Ethan smiled gently. "Then we mess it up together. And we figure it out together. You, me, and Lily." She kissed him, then soft, hesitant at first, but deepening into something that shook them both. It wasn't the kind of kiss that lit up a room. It was the kind that anchored it. And for the first time, neither of them felt like they were falling. They were standing still. Steady. Home. Later that night, Ethan stood at the balcony alone, watching the city light flicker like stars below. The rain had started misting the glass, turning everything soft. He thought about Daniel, about the way his friend used to talk about family like it was the only currency that mattered. Ethan had never understood it, until now. "You'd be proud of her," he whispered into the wind, "of both of them." A warmth settled in his chest that had nothing to do with whiskey or wealth. It was love, quiet, constant, and terrifying in its power. Inside, Emily tucked Lily into bed. The little girl stirred once, mumbling Ethan's name in her sleep, then rolled over with a sigh. Emily watched her for a moment, then joined Ethan on the balcony, sliding her hand into his without a word. They stood in silence. Two people who had once built their lives around walls, now slowly learning how to open them. "I'm not used to feeling safe," she said quietly. "Me neither," Ethan replied. "But I think we're allowed to now." As the rain softened into a mist and the city breathed beneath them, they stayed there, two souls rebuilt from the rubble, holding on to the fragile, precious thing they'd found. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new responsibilities, a world still watching. But tonight, they had peace, and each other. And in the quiet of a home built not from concrete, but from courage, Ethan Callahan finally understood what it meant to belong. It happened on a Monday. Not with a press conference, not with a scandalous leak, just a simple headline on a sleek digital news site that spread like wildfire through social media by noon. Callahan Air, revealed Daniel Hunter's daughter, resurfaces amidst corporate tensions. Beneath it, a photograph of Lily in Ethan's arms mid-laugh, mid-spin. The sun catching the edge of her curls was splashed across the screen with the kind of intimacy the public devours. Ethan froze when he saw it. His phone buzzed, then rang, then pinged again. The board, the press, investors. But his mind wasn't on shareholders. It was on a little girl in pink pajamas who didn't yet know her world was about to shift. Emily was the first to speak when he told her. She sat on the edge of the bed, the tablet clutched tightly in her hands. Lily's drawing of a smiling sun sitting forgotten beside her. "So that's it," she said, voice thin with fear. "They know." Ethan sat down beside her, his eyes scanning her face for cracks. "I'll handle it," he said quietly. "I swear to you, Emily, I will not let them touch her. Not the media, not the shareholders. No one gets to define her life except us." She looked at him, eyes glistening, then leaned into his shoulder. "I should have known this was coming. I just wanted one more day, one more morning where she was just ours." The backlash came hard and fast. News vans parked outside Callahan Tower. Reporters flooded online forums with questions about the heir to Hunter's 15% stake. Speculation flared. Was Lily being used as leverage? Was Ethan grooming a successor to retain control? Anonymous sources painted him as strategic manipulative. Some even questioned Emily's role. Was she a gold digger? A plant? The cruelty didn't surprise him, but it still burned. He called an emergency board meeting that afternoon, and as he sat at the head of the long marble table surrounded by suits who only saw profit margins, Ethan realized something with crystal clarity. He was done playing defense. "The story is out," he began, voice, even eyes steady. "Yes, Lily is Daniel's daughter. She is legally recognized. She holds his legacy. And I will not entertain any suggestions that imply she is a threat to this company. She is a child. My responsibility. My family." The room went still. One board member, a silver-haired man with a permanent scowl, leaned forward. "We understand your personal investment, Ethan, but public perception matters. Investors are nervous. They're saying you've compromised objectivity, that your relationship with the girl's mother." "Say her name," Ethan snapped. "Emily. Her name is Emily Monroe. And if you think protecting the people Daniel cared about is a conflict of interest, you're welcome to leave this board." Later that night, he returned home to find Emily on the balcony, arms folded tight around her ribs. The city glowed below, indifferent to her unraveling. She didn't turn when he stepped outside. "I saw the press," she said. "They're dragging Lily's name across their headlines." "She's 8, Ethan. She still thinks the moon follows her when she walks." He moved beside her, not touching, just standing close. "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry. I thought I could keep it from them longer. I thought we had time." Emily shook her head. "You didn't do this. But now it's here. And we have to decide how we protect her next." He turned to her, heart thudding in his chest. "Then let's decide together. Not just today. Not just for the next headline. But long-term. Real. I want to build something with you, Emily. A life. A family. Not in secret. Not in shadows." She looked up, startled. "Ethan, I love you," he said, cutting through her hesitation. "I love the way you fight, the way you laugh, the way you never asked for anything, even when the world gave you nothing. I love Lily like she's always been mine. And I'm not afraid of this, of us. I want to be the man who stands beside you, in front of you, wherever you need me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, soft and silent. "This isn't the life I pictured," she whispered. "Me neither," he said. "It's better." She leaned into him, then arms wrapping around his waist. Her face pressed against his chest like a surrender that didn't feel like losing. "We're going to be okay," she said. "We already are," he replied, and kissed her temple, his lips lingering like a vow. In the room behind them, Lily's laughter floated from the hallway, bright, untarnished, still untouched by the chaos waiting outside their door. A week later, Ethan walked into the annual shareholder meeting, Emily by his side, Lily waiting safely backstage with a sketchbook and security detail. He stood in front of cameras in front of the world and said, "Daniel Hunter left behind more than numbers. He left behind a daughter, and in protecting her, I found a reason to become more than a CEO. I found a reason to be a better man." His voice didn't shake. His truth didn't flinch. And when he walked off stage, it wasn't applause he cared about. It was the way Emily looked at him, like she was finally letting herself believe they could be real. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Callahan understood that legacy wasn't about towers or titles. It was about love. And it was standing beside him with curly hair and crayon drawings, and a woman who saw through the steel and glass into the man beneath. Spring came late that year, but when it did, it unfolded like a quiet promise over the hills of Northern California. The vineyard Ethan had bought sat just beyond the city's edge, where the roads turned quiet and the sky turned wide. Rows of vines stretched across the earth like carefully kept dreams. And at the center of it all stood a home, not a mansion, not a tower, just a farmhouse with wraparound porches and windows that caught every ounce of sunlight. On the morning they moved in, Lily ran barefoot through the tall grass, chasing a dog Ethan had rescued 2 weeks earlier, while Emily stood in the doorway, arms crossed, heart full. The world had moved on since the court case, since the headlines faded. Merrick resigned quietly. The board settled. Lily's name was gently withdrawn from the media cycle, and in the stillness that followed, something beautiful bloomed. Ethan left his corner office behind, choosing instead to consult remotely, splitting his time between the vineyard and a quiet nonprofit he'd founded in Daniel's memory, an initiative for single mothers and underfunded youth programs. Emily helped manage the property, gardened in the mornings and painted in the afternoons. Lily thrived running to school with her backpack bouncing, laughter ringing louder than ever. One evening, as the sun slipped below the hills and painted the sky in fire, and Rose, Ethan stood in the kitchen watching Emily make tea. Lily was curled up on the couch, her head on the dog's back, a book about planets in her lap. He moved behind Emily, wrapping his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss into the crook of her neck. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she whispered, leaning into him. "But it doesn't. It's just still." He smiled into her skin. "That's what peace feels like," he said. "Unfamiliar, but earned." That weekend, they buried a small wooden box beneath the oldest tree on the property. Inside was Daniel's watch, his last signed blueprint, and a letter Ethan had written but never sent. Lily helped pat down the dirt, unaware of the legacy she stood on, but radiant all the same. "He would have loved this," Emily said quietly, hand finding Ethan's. "He would have loved her." Ethan nodded. "And I think somehow he knew she'd find her way here, that she'd be safe, loved, whole." They stood in silence for a moment longer, then walked back to the house as the sky turned purple with dusk. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hard days, moments when fear crept in, when doubt returned like an old bruise. But those days were fewer now, softened by the routines of love. Lily's drawings on the fridge, Emily's laughter in the morning, Ethan fixing the gate that never quite stayed shut. They were building something not perfect but real, and that Ethan realized was all he ever wanted. Not a legacy of buildings or boardroom accolades, but of warmth, safety, and unconditional belonging. On Lily's 9th birthday, they threw a picnic under the vineyard's shade, inviting friends from both their old world and new. There was cake and music, dancing in bare feet, and a homemade sign Lily had drawn in bold marker, "My family equals my forever." Emily read a poem she'd written, her voice catching only once. Ethan held her hand through the entire reading, never once looking away. When it was done, he kissed her in front of everyone, not out of spectacle but certainty, the kind of kiss that said, "We made it." That night, with stars blooming like fireflies overhead, Emily whispered, "You were right, you know." Ethan smiled, half asleep beside her. "About what?" "That peace can be unfamiliar. But this," she gestured toward the house, the girl sleeping down the hall, the quiet surrounding them. "This feels like home." He wrapped his arms tighter around her and whispered, "It is. It always will be." Outside, the vineyard swayed gently in the breeze, and the world turned without sound or fury. Just softness, just grace. As the seasons changed and time moved like silk, Ethan began writing again. Not memos, not contracts, but pages. About loss, about redemption, about love found in unexpected places. About a man who built towers only to realize the truest strength came from vulnerability. Emily encouraged it. Lily illustrated his chapters. Together they made something lasting not for shelves, but for hearts. And one day, maybe when Lily was older, she would read it and understand everything that had been risked to protect her light. And perhaps that's what stories are for, not just to entertain or distract, but to remind us that love, no matter how broken or late, can still arrive. That sometimes the family we build from the ruins is stronger than the one we were given. That sometimes the end of something isn't a collapse, it's a new beginning waiting to be chosen. So now to you, yes, you reading this, what would you do for the people you love if the world gave you nothing but reasons to let go? Would you hold on anyway? Would you choose them again and again, even when it hurt? Because maybe, just maybe, that's what real love looks like.